The small, sleepy town of Oakridge was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where secrets were whispered behind closed doors, and the air always felt heavy with untold stories. Wyatt was the quiet, polite boy who lived at the edge of town, in an old, creaky house that had seen better days. He was the kind of boy who blended into the background, his pale blue eyes always downcast, his steps always soft, like he was afraid of disturbing the silence. But Oakridge had a dark side. Over the past few months, a series of gruesome murders had shaken the town to its core. Bodies had been found mutilated in the woods, with no clear pattern, no apparent motive. The town was gripped by fear, and whispers started circulating that a serial killer was among them. People began locking their doors at night, eyeing their neighbors with suspicion, and the once peaceful community was slowly unraveling. Wyatt had always been a loner, preferring the company of his books and his thoughts to that of others. But recently, something had changed. He had become more withdrawn, more secretive. He would disappear for hours at a time, returning home with mud-stained clothes and a haunted look in his eyes. His mother, a fragile woman who had never fully recovered from the death of Wyatt's father, noticed the change but was too lost in her own grief to confront him. Then there was Isla. Isla was different from the other kids. Born deaf, she had always been on the outskirts of the social circles in Oakridge. She communicated through sign language, her expressive eyes and quick hands conveying what her voice could not. Isla had always felt a connection to the world that others couldn't understand, a sensitivity to the emotions and intentions of those around her. And recently, she had felt something dark and twisted emanating from Wyatt. Isla began watching Wyatt, her curiosity piqued by his strange behavior. She followed him one evening as he slipped out of his house and made his way into the dense forest that surrounded the town. The trees stood like silent sentinels, their branches casting eerie shadows in the moonlight. Isla kept her distance, her heart pounding in her chest as Wyatt disappeared into the woods. What she saw next chilled her to the bone. Wyatt emerged into a small clearing where a large, flat stone stood in the center. The stone was stained dark with what looked like dried blood. Wyatt knelt beside it, his hands trembling as he pulled something out of his backpack. Isla's breath caught in her throat as she realized what it was. A long, gleaming knife, its blade catching the moonlight. She watched in horror as Wyatt began carving something into the stone, his movements frantic and desperate. When he finally stepped back, Isla saw what he had etched into the rock, a series of symbols and runes that she didn't recognize, but that filled her with a sense of dread. Isla knew she had to act. She couldn't let Wyatt continue whatever dark ritual he was performing. But how could she stop him? She was just a girl, and Wyatt he was a monster, wasn't he? The thought of confronting him sent a shiver down her spine, but she couldn't turn back now. She had to find a way to expose him, to show the town the true face of the boy they all thought they knew. The next day, Isla began piecing together a plan. She started visiting the places where the bodies had been found, searching for clues that might connect Wyatt to the murders. Her heart raced as she discovered footprints in the mud, scraps of fabric that matched the color of Wyatt's clothes, and strands of hair that were the same shade of brown as his. It was all circumstantial, but it was enough to convince Isla that she was on the right track. Finally, the day came when Isla knew she had to make her move. The town was holding a memorial service for the victims of the recent murders, and everyone would be gathered in the town square. Isla knew this was her chance to expose Wyatt for what he truly was. She arrived at the square early, her hands shaking as she clutched a small camera she had borrowed from her father. She had to catch Wyatt in the act, had to show the town the proof they needed to believe her. As the service began, Isla spotted Wyatt standing near the edge of the crowd, his expression blank as he listened to the speeches. She waited, her breath shallow, her heart pounding in her ears. And then, it happened. Wyatt slipped away from the crowd, making his way toward the woods. Isla followed at a distance, her camera ready. She knew where he was going, back to the clearing, back to the stone. She had to be quick, had to catch him before he realized she was there. When she reached the clearing, she hid behind a tree, her camera trained on Wyatt. He was standing in front of the stone, his hands trembling as he pulled out the knife once again. Isla could see the madness in his eyes, the desperation, and she knew she had to act fast. But just as she was about to press the shutter, something unexpected happened. Wyatt dropped the knife, his hands covering his face as he began to sob uncontrollably. Isla watched in stunned silence as the boy she had thought was a monster crumpled to the ground, his body racked with sobs. And then she saw it. The figure standing just behind Wyatt, its face hidden in the shadows. It was a man, tall and thin, with a twisted smile that sent a chill down Isla's spine. The man stepped forward, placing a hand on Wyatt's shoulder, and Wyatt flinched as if he had been burned. Isla's mind raced. Who was this man? What was he doing here? And then it hit her. The man was the real killer. Wyatt wasn't a monster. He was a pawn, a terrified boy caught in the grip of something much darker and more evil than she had imagined. Before Isla could react, the man turned his gaze toward her, his eyes locking onto hers. Isla's breath caught in her throat as she realized that he knew she was there, that he had seen her. The man's smile widened, and he whispered something to Wyatt, who slowly stood up, his eyes empty and hollow. Isla knew she had to run. She had to get out of the woods, had to warn the others. But as she turned to flee, she tripped on a root, her camera slipping from her grasp and skidding across the ground. The sound was deafening in the silence, and Isla froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The man and Wyatt turned toward her, their expressions unreadable. Isla scrambled to her feet, her hands shaking as she backed away, her eyes darting between the two figures. She had to get out of there, had to escape, but she felt paralyzed, rooted to the spot. Then, to her surprise, Wyatt spoke. His voice was soft, trembling, but there was a note of defiance in it. "Run," he whispered, his eyes locked onto Isla's. "Run, and don't look back." Isla didn't need to be told twice. She turned and fled, her feet pounding the earth as she raced through the woods, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, she could hear the man's voice, cold and mocking, but she didn't dare look back. She had to get away, had to find help. When she finally burst out of the woods and into the town square, she was gasping for breath, her clothes torn and her face streaked with dirt. The townspeople stared at her in shock as she collapsed to her knees, her hands trembling as she pointed back toward the forest. "He's in there," she gasped, her voice hoarse. "Wyatt, he's not the killer. It's someone else, someone controlling him." The words tumbled out of her in a rush, and for a moment, the crowd was silent, processing what she had just said. And then, slowly, they began to move, a few brave souls stepping forward to head into the woods, while the others gathered around Isla, trying to comfort her. But Isla knew the truth. She had seen the darkness in that man's eyes, had felt the evil radiating from him. Wyatt was just a boy, a scared, broken boy, caught in a nightmare that he couldn't escape from. And as the crowd moved toward the woods, Isla prayed that they would find him, that they would save him before it was too late. But deep down, she knew that some shadows couldn't be outrun, that some nightmares couldn't be escaped, and she knew that Oakridge would never be the same again. If you enjoyed this story and want to experience more thrilling tales, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for more spine-chilling adventures that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Your support helps us bring you the best in horror storytelling. Thank you for watching,